Trump players, notably Paul Manafort. Again, this is all out there. We know that. And you may say, well, what's the big deal? Well, what's the big deal? You've just told us for 2 years in the media that foreign collusion during elections was a big deal. We know that Alexandra Chalupa, who left the DNC, was working with key Ukrainians and others and the media to flesh out and pump out stories about Manafort and others, which, again, you just told us foreign collusion was this awful, terrible thing, which it is. But why, when it's the Ukrainians and Democrats, is it let go? And one more point on this. Bruce Orr, who is the upper-level Justice Department official.
Bruce Orr, who was on the staff of the Deputy Attorney General, and whose wife worked for Fusion GPS.
That's right.
And who was involved in a lot of the seedy activity taking place in the shadows to try and set up the Trump candidacy and administration.
And Orr is Steele's handler after he's terminated by the FBI for leaking to the media. Orr's wife, as you accurately stated, works for Fusion GPS, has already stated, Bruce Orr's wife, this justice official, on the record, that some of the information they were getting from Ukrainians. Mark, listen, are we dealing with principles here? Are we dealing with phony frauds? I thought foreign collusion was bad. If foreign collusion is a bad thing, which I agree, then why is the Ukrainian collusion with Nellie Orr, Bruce's wife, and Alexandra Chalupa at the DNC, why isn't Jerry Nadler having hearings about that?
So I assume the House Intelligence Committee, headed by Adam Schiff, is very interested in this. I assume in the Senate Intelligence Committee, headed by Richard Burr, Republican, is very interested in that. No interest whatsoever.
No, he's a train wreck, Burr. He's been a disaster in this case from day one. We saw the leaker in the Senate get off nearly scot-free, the staffer. This has been a joke. Sadly, the Senate committee's really dropped the ball. And even worse, we have the text of Mark Warner, the Democrat from Virginia, him texting a lawyer working for Oleg Deripaska. Who's Oleg Deripaska? Tie it back to the beginning of the show. He appears in the 2007 movie script article in the Wall Street Journal and is a key ally of Vladimir Putin. So let me get this straight. A key Democratic senator on the Senate Intel Committee investigating foreign collusion is texting a lawyer working for a Russian connected to Putin about foreign collusion? Yes, you can read the text yourself. They're all
let me tell you something. When this is looked back upon in 50 years, you and a handful of others are going to be credited with having revealed this, because this is the most diabolical inside-out job I've ever seen. That is, where the true victim is treated as the perpetrator, and the perpetrators are treated as the patriots. We don't want involvement by the Russians. No, yes, you do. No. We don't want collusion with the Russians. Yeah, no, actually you do. Because the end justifies the means and anything to win. And so when Mr. Warner gave his speech in one of the hearings on TV and said, this is America, we don't support the intrusion in our elections of foreign powers, to your point, he forgot to mention the Ukraine. But even worse than the Ukraine and Russia was Obama. He and his administration interfering in the election. That is what cannot be accepted. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, you can watch Levin TV most weeknights. Levin TV. Just join up by calling 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV, or go to blazetv.com/Mark, blazetv.com/Mark to sign up. Don't forget this great book, which is it's hot off the presses, and it's coming out Tuesday, exonerated by our man, Dan Bongino. And if you think about it, you might want to also pick up On Freedom of the Press. We'll be right back. Now, Dan Bongino, one of the things you put in your book that I was unaware of completely, and by the way, I don't think anyone's aware of, is 2 months or so into the Mueller investigation after he was appointed, he knew enough to shut it down.
Absolutely.
So and how is that? What is that?
Well, we've established through this show now a couple of things. Obama knows what's going on. They're weaponizing the government to spy on Trump. And then they weaponize the government to get an appointment of a special counsel because they can't prosecute Trump and they have to bury this case. So what happens? Well, Mueller's appointed in May of 2017. About 2 months later, and the timeline's a little bit up in the air, we don't know when exactly he sees them, but he gets the infamous texts from the FBI cabal, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and others. Mueller gets that file from the Inspector General, essentially the internal affairs officer for the government, who says, hey, Bob, You need to look at this. Those are the infamous smelly Walmart people texts where they start talking about this entire setup, the London connections, and basically...
Insurance policy, all of it.
Yes, bingo. It is basically a blueprint of the setup and framing of Donald J. Trump. Now, what would any ethical, reasonable person, especially a lawyer like Mueller who knows the system, do? Mark, they would shut it down, if not seek prosecution against the people who did this if crimes were committed. That's not what happens. What happens is unbelievable, and I haven't seen anyone else report on this connection. Remember July of 2017, some key events happened. That's the quickie raid on Paul Manafort's house in the early morning, right around July of 2017. So let me get this straight. Bob Mueller's reading about these texts and how this is a setup, how this case is a train wreck, how the investigators are corrupted, and instead of turning around and dumping the case and going up in front of the American people and saying, we screwed up, they do an early morning raid on Paul Manafort.
Now, why do they do that?
Because they need to cover their tracks on it.
To show that they're really chasing substantive things.
Manafort is a key player in both the movie script and the dossier. And I believe what they're doing is they're trying to put meat on the bones of the dossier so they can say later, and this is an important takeaway in the book, okay, we screwed up, the dossier's made up, the whole sexual thing and all this other stuff on Trump was fake. But look, Manafort, was a really bad guy. We raided his house in the morning. But who else gets hit? Right around July of 2017, Papadopoulos gets arrested at Dulles Airport. Why? Why Dulles?
And he's not even a bit player. He's a no player.
He is the lowest level possible foreign policy advisor. He gets arrested on what we believe to be a PC arrest, which, Mark, in the federal government, that is very rare outside of CBP and uniform
What's a
people.
PC arrest?
It's a probable cause arrest, the equivalent of what a police officer would do. In other words, a non-warrant arrest. I see you fighting with a guy in the street, I arrest you. There's no warrant. That is exceedingly rare.
So they get around the court, basically.
Yes, you were a lawyer. What do? You present a complaint to an assistant United States attorney, gives you an arrest warrant. The cases work in reverse in the federal system. Why would you rush to Dulles Airport to get George Papadopoulos at Dulles when he was going to Chicago, by the way, and could have gotten his lawyer on a PC arrest, very unusual with 1811 federal agents? Why? Because you just got the text and found out what a farce this was. And again, you have to get these guys to shut them up. And that's what they did.
How many Americans were prosecuted for conspiring with the Russians?
None.
For colluding with the Russians?
Zero.
For conveying information to the Russians?
Zero. None.
And Carter Page, the original target, is wandering the earth a free man. They didn't even think about charging him in the end. And he was the excuse for the FISA warrant and the 3 extensions, wasn't he?
He was the main player in the dossier, and think about this. To this day, Carter Page is a free man who has never been charged with a single crime, despite having his name absolutely dragged through the mud. Remember, you need 2 things for that FISA warrant. Probable cause that you're working on behalf of a foreign actor, but it was done in violation of the U.S. law. They did not have that. So you know what they did? They made it up. And what was the violation of U.S. law? The bribery charge against Carter Page, that he was being bribed by this Russian energy company. That was the crime. Totally, completely fabricated.
We'll be right back.